What's up, nerds? So, I just kind of came back from my 6 month break from playing RuneScape and thought I should probably do Desert Treasure 2 and learn these new bosses. And man, I forgot how bad I am at bossing, especially at the start. But that's the thing. I'm generally pretty bad right at the start. I usually find my way, pick things up, get more kills per trip, the usual stuff when you practice. But it did kind of inspire me to make this video talk about what is my process for learning new bosses. Because for things like Vardorvis, they're pretty mechanically dense, there's a lot happening on your screen, and I thought, what if I can just talk about what I try and do to simplify kind of the whole thing? Plus, maybe help others to keep trying whatever boss they're trying to learn. And hopefully these principles don't just apply to these Desert Treasure 2 bosses, and they apply to raids and, Obor, who knows. So I wrote down 6 things I try and keep in mind generally when I'm practicing a new boss or learning things for the first time. I think number one here is probably one of the most important. Focus less on following a formula and more understanding what is actually happening. I think we can all kind of get stuck in this trap of watching YouTube videos, following exactly where they click, what ticks to do certain things on, and that is helpful and that can get you to learn the boss, but it's not the way to learn for everybody, especially for me. And I think when you learn that way, you don't always kind of pick up what's actually happening and why the boss does what it does. You kind of just know that, okay, I click here when this happens. But what that kind of usually does for you is when things go awry, especially in something like Champions of Xeric, when a mistake is made, you don't know how to correct it. You don't actually understand why Ulm turns his head, why Ulm uses this attack, what is his attack cycle. And without that knowledge, when the mistake happens, you don't click right. We're supposed to click when you need to. How do you recover? You really can't because you don't know why you even did it in the first place. This can also be as simple as, all right, in the Vardorvis fight, when the axes start on one side, how do they fly to the other? It can also be when the range attack is shot by that little skull thing that pops up. Can he melee you when the range is flying at you? Understanding that is important just so you know what your limits are and what you're allowed to do in terms of eating, prayer swapping, gear swapping, where you can look. Once you do kind of get into the grind and start trying to really sit down with the boss and learn it, I say knowing your limits is pretty important. You're not going to be doing tick perfect swaps, clicking on the exact tile right when you need to. You're not going to be doing perfect gear swaps. This is especially important in learning something like Theater of Blood. You don't need to bring 7-way switches for every boss room. Bringing less switches and more food and Ceridome brews and super restores is probably better for you at the start. Even this applies to something like Vardorvis or Desert Treasure 2 bosses. You know, should you bring Ceridome brews just so you can get through your kills for the first time? Those may not be listed in the wiki, but hey, they help you get the KC, and those KC help you learn. Number 3 is a big one for me. I kind of hate ticks. When people talk about the tick system, my eyes glaze over, and I just want to fall asleep and never play the game again. And hey, that's just me. The game is based on ticks, but counting ticks doesn't really make sense to me, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to count ticks. I just kind of feel it. It's kind of get into a groove and hope for the best. But things like audio and video cues are things you can actually latch onto with your brain and really focus on. I think the big one is with Zulrah. Zulrah has the Jad phase and he swaps between range and mage. Knowing when you should swap your prayers is technically a tick-based thing, and a lot of guides will put it in ticks, but when you put it in ticks and you're new, what does that even mean? I swap my prayers when Zulrah's hood on his little snake face closes in and opens, and as soon as it closes in, I swap to the other prayer. It works for me every time. I don't understand the ticks that go into it, but hey, I have over 3,000 Zulrah KC and I get pretty long trips, so it works. Number 4 is something that's probably familiar if you've watched my first ever YouTube video I made. Understand your order of operations. Just when you start doing the boss, try and figure out what needs to happen first. With Vardorvis, movement and prayer are the 2 big things. So trying to pay attention to what's on the floor and what's around you is number 1. You check for axes. Okay, are the axes in my lane of movement? If yes, I need to click. Audio cues. I hear that little sound of the head popping up. I need to swap to range and before I do anything else, because when that thing hits me, if I'm not on range, it will turn off my prayers. I'll take way more damage from a melee hit. It's just bad news bears. So knowing at every moment of the boss fight what is the most important thing to be doing is just incredibly, incredibly important. Number 5 is, again, kind of goes along with focus less on ticks. If it works for you, that's all that matters. If you think that bringing if okay, here's a good example. At the Vardorvis fight, you save your specs for, the enrage phase. If instead you like to bring a light bearer and Dragonclaw at the start of the fight, just get some extra damage off, and that feels better and it's more fun, and you feel like it helps you get the kill done, go for it. The guides may not say it, but if it gets it done for you, who cares? And going right into number 6, same thing. If a method is fun for you, it can matter way more than it being efficient. Because if you're doing the most efficient way possible and you're not having a good time, you're not going to grind the boss and you're just not going to get the KC. When I did most of my Zulrah grind, I didn't do range-only Bofa because I like doing the mage swaps. Swapping to mage was part of the fun and kept it interesting. If I do Twisted Bow only or Bofa only, it's so brain dead at this point. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. But having that mage swap in there keeps it exciting, keeps my brain active, and hey, it's may not be better based on my gear, but or even more efficient or cost effective. I don't even know, but all I know is I like it and it helps me keep doing it, so I'm gonna keep doing it. And that's it. Happy to be making videos again.